Today on Cryptic Mass Guitar, we do a comparison between the Gibson Les Paul Standard 60s and the Gibson Custom 1960 Les Paul Standard VOS. Well, actually, it's a Murphy Lab. Now, very quickly, I'd like to say the same thing in all of these comparison videos here. That is, YouTube is fantastic to watch videos on different guitars, some that you might be looking to buy. It's great because you get a different perspective on, the guitar itself being played in someone else's hands, albeit with someone else's amp choices, setting choices, and what they're playing. But it's very important that you don't use YouTube videos as the sole reason why you're buying a guitar. Make sure that you're going into the store and playing it for yourself, and that's going to be the best way to choose, because you might like a certain guitar, the way that it looks, the way that it sounds in a video, but you might go and play it and you might not bond with it. So if you have that ability, I know some guitars aren't always in stock, go ahead and try that guitar yourself, see if it works for you, and then try more expensive and lesser expensive guitars and just make sure that it's the right one for you. But I do have 5 sound samples for you today. 5 different tunings, 5 different amps, different settings, of course. And because it's this channel, yes, don't worry, there is a full-on metal sound sample. All right, so there you go. There are all of the 5 different sound samples for the comparison. So what I'm going to do now is talk about the spec differences, but I'm only going to touch on them, rather quickly, hopefully, because I've done a more in-depth video on the differences where I go over, all the different things, including like magnet types and what glues used and all that stuff. So if you want more in depth, I'll try and link it in the description, but I'm old and I forget things, so So starting off, both are gloss nitrocellulose finish. VOS here is a lot more glass, so that means the Murphy Lab here is just a little bit thinner when it comes to the coating of the nitro finish. You can put on your tinfoil hats, but basically that means you feel in your body and in your hands a little more of the low end because of that. Both are also non-weight relieved guitars, so the only carvings underneath the carved maple top is just the channel for the toggle switch, the pickups, and the control cavity. Both have the slab mahogany back. However, the Gibson USA here is 2 pieces of mahogany, whereas the Murphy Lab here is a single piece of mahogany. Maple tops will definitely vary for both. The standard 60s is typically a double A flame, whereas the 1960 Les Paul Standard, you can get like the Come to Jesus flame, and you can get something with just a little bit of light flame to it. Both the rosewood fretboards with the trapezoid inlays, the inlays are different from one to the other. They're also bound with the fret nibs or nubbies, if you want to call them that. The binding on the Murphy Lab is a little bit thinner, same with the fret nibs. That means that the fretboard is rolled a little more. Both have the inlaid Gibson logo with the silk screened Les Paul model on top there. There's no name badging on the Murphy Lab here because that's not what they did back in the 60s. And there's a standard truss rod cover on the Gibson USA. Also comes with a blank truss rod cover. As far as pickups, the USA has the 61R and 61T. Man, they changed the name of this, so they're the exact same pickups, but now I think they call them the 60s Burstbuckers or the 60s Burstbuckers Tributes. They are unpotted, just like the Murphy Lab here, which has the Custom Bucker Alnico 3 unpotted pickups. Both of these are also hand soldered. The USA here has the orange drop capacitors, whereas the Murphy Lab here has the paper and oil capacitors. 95% of guitar players never use their tone control except for on full blast, so the capacitors won't really come into play. And as far as the bridges, both have the ABR1 with a stop bar. However, the Gibson USA here has a metal doweling system, how it attaches the bridge to the body, whereas the Murphy Lab here, it's drilled directly into the body. The last thing I do want to touch on are the tuners. So, on the standard 60s, the Gibson USA, we have Grover Rotomatic tuners. They were not used typically until the 70s. However, Gibson does this thing with their original series where they kind of treat it like it's a hot rodded version or a modded version of it. So Grovers were typically used as an upgraded tuner type. So that's why you're seeing it here on the standard 60s. It also helps differentiate it from the standard 50s, which has the Clouson style Gibson Vintage Deluxe. And the Murphy Lab or any of the VOS has the vintage sizing Clouson Vintage Deluxe tuners. Vintage sizing, it's a little smaller than more modern type. So that means if you wanted to get locking tuners on the standard 60s, you just put it in. You might have to drill some pilot holes if you're not going with Grover Roto grips. So that's just in the back. But you wouldn't have to ream out the holes to make them bigger. On this, you definitely would. You would have to make the holes wider so you could actually connect the tuners. Man, I tried to not talk too much about the specs, but they are really important. But if you want something more in depth, go ahead and take a look at that What's the Difference video. So at this point, I want to talk about my thoughts on both of these guitars. So I own both of these guitars. So the standard 60s is mine. The 1960 Les Paul Standard is mine. So this is not one of those like I'm borrowing it off of a friend or renting or anything like that. I own both of these guitars. So as far as, dog in a fight, I don't really have one. I own both dogs. So I'm going to try and give you my absolute honest opinion when it comes to the differences here. So you don't need either of these. If you have the Epiphone version or any other guitar and that works really well for you and it makes you want to keep picking that guitar up and playing it, and it doesn't matter whether you have the Gibson or the Gibson Custom. It's not kind of what makes you a player. So I'm not going to sit here and say ditch everything you have and buy the Custom or whatever. But the Custom, to me, just has a little more, like I feel the guitar more. It moves a lot more when I'm playing it, so in my body. The pickups are a little bit sweeter. The lows aren't, I don't want to say overbearing because that's not how the 61R and 61T sound. But I mean, when it comes to the 61R versus the neck custom bucker here, it just seems that the lows there's a lot more emphasis on the low end. And it may kind of get lost in translation in direct comparison to the custom buckers. The 61T versus the custom bucker, the bridge pickup, it's not as sweet, and there's definitely more emphasis on like just the mid-range, and the 61T is just a little bit hotter than the custom bucker. Now, I think, like I've always felt that some pickups that are like hotter pickups, they're not harder to control, but they kind of do their own thing, whereas pickups that are a little more reserved, aren't as hot, you can kind of get a little more out of your amp with them, if that makes any sense. That's personal preference. So there's a lot of guitar players that don't feel that way and would much prefer hotter pickups. They can kind of make that work a lot better than more reserved pickups. So that's just something to keep in mind. Pop your tinfoil hat on here because, to be very honest, I don't know this for sure, but it's very important to me to make mention of it. So like I said, the USA has Type Bond glue. There's more pieces of wood, so that means there's more glue that goes into the body. The customs use hot hide glue. Well, the custom reissues. So if you're looking at like the more affordable Gibson Les Paul Custom that is made in the custom shop, but it's not a reissue, that doesn't use hot hide glue. So the reissues use hot hide glue. Now that kind of crystallizes, and people say that it fuses the wood together better, and it's just a little, like the tiniest bit acoustically louder, and it kind of makes everything ring out as one. That paired with the fact that the bridge is drilled directly into the body would really help that. You know what I mean? There's a little more vibrancy to it. I always thought that that was crazy until I played a VOS, and I'm in the process now of switching over all my guitars to VOS. So they all kind of have that feel to them. So that is something, you have to mention it. And the fact that it's, you know, one piece mahogany rather than 2 or 3 pieces of mahogany like the Gibson USA. And it's choice lightweight mahogany as well. So that means the custom shop is like ever so slightly lighter than the USA. So I mean, that would definitely help it as well. There's less pieces of wood for the same size of everything. So yeah, just, I mean, you can take your tinfoil hat off now because I'm not going to talk about it anymore, but I just have to mention it. The great thing here is both of these are Les Pauls. Both of these have the slab mahogany back and the carved maple top. So I don't have to put it on my lap and say, hey, this feels a little different here because it's an SG, and this feels a little different here because it's a Telecaster, and this feels a little different here because it's, you know what I mean? They both sit on the lap the same. They both have the same amount of reach. So it's just a matter of preference, whether you find when you're playing it, there's a little more bite, there's a little more vibrancy to the custom shop over the USA. Whether that matters to you or not, that's really where things kind of ring in. Me, I find that the ringing out of playing chords, especially open chords on the custom shop, is just a little more noticeable for the bite. And when you're playing leads, that bite kind of translates in a little more, which would probably keep me reaching towards the VOS or Murphy Labs more than the USA. But I've owned the USAs for years and years, and I've always loved them. They've never really treated me bad, so I don't know. Take that for kind of what it is. That's all I do have to say. There's not really much to it. I look forward to the comments that you generally get when you're comparing Gibson to Gibson or Gibson to Epiphone, or, you know, Gibson's one of those brands that, you know, kind of get attacked, deservedly so at times, I guess you would say. But I don't know, I can't get myself away from them. I'm always reaching for a Gibson. So, yeah, I do look forward to both of them suck. You could get an Epiphone is way better, or, you know, Squire's way better, or whatever makes you feel better, I guess. So thanks for watching. There's going to be more custom shop versus USA comparisons that I do. The standard 50s will definitely be one of them. The 61 Les Paul, which is an SG, versus the standard 61, SG standard 61, that'll be one of them. And I just ordered a 1964 VOS, so that's the SG standard with the Maestro Vibrola. And I have a Gibson USA SG standard 61 with Maestro Vibrola. So that'll be one that I do like a what's the difference video, and then direct comparison like this one. So keep an eye out there, and thanks for watching.